49er faithful fans of the Niner Station, welcome back to our podcast. It's Thomas, Ryan, and Mark. We are once again going to be talking to you about the 49ers. I wish we had good news, but this was a tough week. This was a very tough game for all of us to watch. Ryan and Mark, how you guys doing?
Thomas, Mark, not doing too well. It was a brutal loss. It's been a while since we've been on the pod, but going out to Green Bay, getting beat by Buffalo in the snow, terrible. So we have to unpack it. Let's get into it, guys.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Apologize for last week. I had a little bit of a stomach bug and couldn't make it on for the Green Bay post game, and it kind of lapped into the Buffalo game, in which I have very much of the same feelings based off both games. So we can get into that. And as a 49er fan, I think the season is to the point where we are thinking, what kind of draft pick can we get next year? We're not thinking about playoffs. We're not thinking about Super Bowl. We're thinking about draft picks, which is nothing that we thought we were going to be in at the start of the season. But at this point, I think this is a conversation that we need to have. And the Buffalo game, there was not a lot of positives to talk about. So let's get into the Buffalo game as much as we want to talk about it, and then the future of this franchise, because there's going to be a shift that needs to happen in this offseason, I think, and we'll see if they will do that.
Like you said, Mark, not a whole lot of good to come out of that game. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad that came out of it. As many of you listeners know, in one of our fantasy football leagues, I unfortunately fell victim and drafted Christian McCaffrey #1 overall. I fell victim to the Madden video game that came out shortly before draft time. Saw that, drafted Christian McCaffrey, and to see him go down in that second quarter in Buffalo, man, it really hurt. Just to come here where we were at week 14 and just tracking the whole season. Will Christian McCaffrey come back and save the 49ers? And at some points, he did look all right. Busted out a few runs. He got stopped by a shoestring tackle one time. Almost took that one to the house. But to see him go down with that PCL injury, we found out, and to eventually be put on IR and have his season ended, it's just terrible, man. And the running back room, I'm not even sure what it's going to look like moving forward with the news of Christian McCaffrey and even news of Jordan Mason going on IR too. So it's just kind of a weird situation with the running back room, and we have to start there.
Yeah, right. I tried to tell you at the beginning of the year not to draft McCaffrey. You disregarded my advice and you went with McCaffrey. I suggested Justin Jefferson, which I think would have been a much better play for your fantasy team. I think you can tell me if you disagree. But McCaffrey going out, Mason going out, like this season, like I said a few weeks ago in pods, like I'm getting 2020 vibes. Right after the last Super Bowl that we lost to the Chiefs, injury-ridden. You know, I think it was a 5-11 season or 6-10 season, something like that. It was not good. And we'll see what comes from the running back room. I mean, Isaac Rindo has an opportunity now to prove that he can be a every down back, because he is the #1 running back on the 49ers. We will see what he can do for the 49ers this year. And for me, that's exactly what the rest of the season needs to be for the 49ers. It needs to be figure out what your young guys can do, how can they produce, and get ready for the next season. Because in my opinion, this season is over. There's no chance of making the playoffs, and it's just about figuring out the future of this franchise.
It's hard to explain what it's like as a 49er fan when you watch the brutal loss in the snow, and then we get a player like Jordan Mason comes in and starts to do what we wanted Jordan Mason to do, right? You know, we wanted Jordan Mason to be able to get carries, to be able to do his thing, to run. He ran free, right? I think he had 78 yards or so, fantasy-wise. But, man, it was brutal just watching the 49ers offense have to do things that are a little out of normal, right? I mean, we couldn't pass the ball, couldn't run the ball. We got our ass kicked up and down the field. And luckily for us, we were able to manage a little bit of the offense, but man, it was just a tough game to watch. Like, to be honest to our fans, I stopped watching the game on the big screen probably 30 minutes in, 40 minutes in. I mean, right after halftime, it felt like I was already tuned out and watching other stuff because we just didn't really produce the same way that we normally do. It was just hard to watch. Like, as a fan, it was hard to watch. I feel like that might be the theme here going forward. Is it being hard to watch was not ideal, to say the least. I mean, we were watching a game where our beloved team wasn't producing. So, Ryan, I'm assuming you kind of feel the same way.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even it seemed like there was just a lot of mistakes going on, and we could blame a lot on the weather, the snow being a big factor. But one thing that came to my mind was I wonder how Brock Purdy is going to be affected after this game. It wasn't the best game. There were a lot of instances where the ball like slipped out of Brock's hand. And it's kind of one of those things, like, how do you prepare for that? Especially as a California team going into the different tundras and the different weathers, because that's going to happen every single year. And I'm really curious how the season's going to play out with Brock following this performance, because we talked about before in past podcasts how we view Brock as a $60 million quarterback. And we do definitely think that Brock deserves that money. But I wonder now if this opens up any sort of negotiation room with Brock, and maybe we could save some money and maybe bring in some other players down the road. But yeah, I'm just curious to see how it goes with Brock.
Yeah, Ryan, you're 100% right when it comes to Brock Purdy. Like, this is a year where he had to put up or shut up, is how they say it, right? And you earn your money. And he hasn't been bad, but he also hasn't been a $60 million quarterback. To me, I think he's more around a $40 million quarterback. And that's where this whole season at this point revolves around. Like, what's the future for the 49ers? The number one topic is quarterback, because that's what costs the most money. And I think Brock Purdy is a $40 million quarterback. He's not a $60 million. He's not a $50 million. He's a $40 million. And if I'm the 49ers, I'm saying, hey, Brock, here's, 3 years, $40 million a year for $120 million total, maybe 2.5 years guaranteed, and saying, hey, if you want to come back and be the leader of this franchise, then you need to come out and prove that you can be that guy. And a year and a half, if you have proven that, then you can get that payday where you get your $60 million a year. But hey, you've only made $1 million a year up to this point. Here's $40 million a year. Prove it, and let's see where we go from there. Because this 49ers team needs a whole reset. There's a lot of money being spent on guys that are not living up to the expectations. Ayuk, obviously injured. Debo, definitely not living up to his money right now. Kittle is living up to his money. Trent Williams, tragedy what happened to him and his wife, but he is not living up to his money this year. Charvarius Ward, tragedy what happened to him and his wife, not living up to his money. There's a lot of guys not living up to their money this year, so if they're going to have a successful season next year, they're going to have to figure out, hey, are you truly a guy that we can pay? And if you're not, how can we get off of this contract to look to the future? Because for me, at this point, it's all about the future for the 49ers, because this year is not the year. And so you have to look at rebuilding the roster in a way that you can be competitive with Brock Purdy as your quarterback, making number one quarterback money. Regardless of that 60 million, 40 million, I think it should be 40 million. Obviously, that saved you 20 million on salary cap, but regardless of what money he makes, it's a rebuilding, maybe not rebuilding, but retooling mindset. We have to build this roster out where we can be successful in the future going forward, because the window for this current team is closed and it needs to reopen with some future stars, in my opinion.
Mark, completely agree. I mean, we're kind of in that weird situation where it almost feels like the 49ers are going to go a different direction with our personnel. And unfortunately, it kind of goes on both the offense and the defense, like where we're going to move forward. I do think that moving forward, the Niners should re-sign Brock Purdy, but we have to re-sign a lot of players. Like, it's not just like an easy formula, I guess, if you will, moving forward. Like, we have a lot of things up in the air. We're going to have Brock Purdy up for contract, Charvarius Ward up for contract. I mean, our rookies, Denardo Green, they're all safe, right? They're under a rookie 4-year guarantee. But moving forward, we're not exactly in the best situation as 49ers. Like, this isn't a good situation. Like, we're literally looking at who we keep, who we don't keep as we move forward as a 49ers franchise, like hoping that we're going to be like a perennial competitor. It doesn't feel like we're the same perennial competitor, though. At this point in the season, we're one loss away from not being a playoff relevant team, right? We have to beat our division in every single game. And coming off a Buffalo Bills loss, we're in a situation where that's not a guarantee that we're going to win against the Rams, the Seahawks, or we already lost. We're 1-1 against the Seahawks, so we lost against them. So we have to literally win out and hope that we make the right decisions moving forward, because otherwise, the 49er faithful, we're in a situation where it's not looking that bright. You can't necessarily game plan for the 49ers. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel so insecure this season. I think insecurity as a fan is kind of the way I would put it, because it's not exactly what we would hope for things to be. At this point in the season, we were hoping to have 3 or 4 more wins, right? I mean, we've lost all those fourth quarter games, but this is terrible. I mean, we're walking into a situation that none of us planned for, but we're in it. It's real. 49ers need to figure out what to do to get out of this, and I don't know if we can. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's tough because the last couple pods for the last few games, we mentioned that each game that we lost is becoming more and more must-win territory. We lost 3 games in a row that we said were must-win games, and we hate to say it again, but this game against Chicago, like, this is a game that we have to win. They have a 4-8 record. Technically, it's worse than us, and it's a perfect opportunity to be like a get-right game. They recently fired their coach, so if it can't happen this week, then I agree, Thomas, that I'm really not sure what to tell the faithful, because something's going on. Like, for example, Shanahan's been on a big topic of discussion following the Buffalo loss. So the decision-making people question, and they have every right to question. Like, for example, like George Kittle only getting 1 reception against Buffalo, the best tight end in the league, not getting used at all. And we're talking about Deebo Samuel not producing, not stepping up for Ayuk when he's being hurt. Well, what about our first-round rookie wide receiver that we drafted, Ricky Pearsall? He had 0 receptions in this past game, not used at all. Not really used since that first game where he scored that touchdown. So we're not really sure what's going on. Some of the decision making, why players aren't being used or being used the way that they are. So it's just a lot to question. And I think people have a right to question Kyle Shanahan at the moment if he's on the hot seat.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of takes about Shanahan this week in podcasts and on the radio. Fire Shanahan. He's trash. He's not a good coach. First of all, what I would like to say is this. The guy has got us to 2 Super Bowls and 4 NFC championship games in 5 years. So the guy is a good coach, first of all. Second of all, the guy is not a great talent evaluator. No one really knows how the dynamic goes with the 49ers as far as GM and draft picks and free agency and the Niners. Everyone thinks that, Shanahan has the final say-so in all of those things. I, on the other hand, think that maybe Shanahan has first round say-so, and then Shanahan and the rest of the guys have the rest of the draft to do what they want, which might explain why they've only hit on 2 draft picks in the first round since Shanahan has taken over, those being Ayuk and Bosa. But for me, when it comes down to this year, I don't think it's a Shanahan thing. I think it's a personnel thing. And I think that they have put themselves in a situation where they are trying to run a system that they've ran the past 4 or 5 years, and they simply just don't have the personnel to run it. McCaffrey was not there to begin the year. You had Mason being the number 1 back, and leaned on Mason heavy. Great, I like it. But he also did not give a lot of room for Garindo to develop as a running back. When McCaffrey comes back, now all of a sudden Garindo and Mason are just forgotten. Like, we just feed the ball to McCaffrey. So for me, this season's over. This season's simply over, and it's about figuring out what to do for the future. And we need to lose to the Bears. We need to lose to the Lions. We need to lose to the remaining teams on our schedule to get a top draft pick, because that is exactly what we need. We need young talent. that's cost effective because we're about to pay Brock Purdy, and we just need to look toward the future. And Aaron Banks is not going to be here next year. Hopefully, Colton McKivvick's not going to be here next year. Brindle's not going to be here next year. Juszczyk's not going to be here next year. So that's where I would like to turn this conversation right now in this podcast, away from the Bills' loss. We know what that was about. Away from the Bears, and just look at the future of this organization and see what we have cooking for us, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts. And I think that O-line is a definite necessity to address in the offseason. D-line, a definite necessity to address this offseason. Linebacker, if you can bring your in-law back on a good contract coming off an injury, maybe that's okay, but we still need to address that. DB, I'm confident we have the pieces. We need to look at this roster as a whole and say, where are we going forward, and how can we compete with the best teams in the league? Because the past 2 weeks we got blown out by two of the best teams in the league, NFC and AFC, in the Bills and Green Bay Packers. So where do you guys think the Niners go forward from here as far as building the roster and getting back to the Super Bowl contender that they need to be with Shanahan?
I think I fully agree with you on. It's more of like, I think people forget that Shanahan is the best coach that we've had in what, a decade?
Since Harbaugh.
I mean, since Harbaugh, we haven't been a perennial contender, right? We've been competitive, but we haven't been a contender. And so what I want to see for the 49ers as they move forward is go back to our basis, go back to D-line, go back to O-line, preferably O-line. But I think we're looking at this season as, if we don't make the playoffs and we end up having a top 15 to 20 pick, that pick 100% has to be used on the O-line. Now, we could use it on the D-line like we've done historically, but I don't think that that's the right direction. I think 100% we need to do a rebuild, in a sense where we're drafting O-linemen in the first and second, third round, and we're rebuilding the team through the line, not on the defensive side initially, because we don't hit on the O-line, we don't hit on other draft picks, but we
need
can
a replacement
hit.
for Trent Williams. You need a replacement for Trent Williams because he only has one more year left.
You read my mind, Mark. Thank you so much. No, I
Center.
think that we don't really
Center.
hit well. We need these players, though, because it shows on the game film. We're not there. There's not like there's not a gap. If our running backs are having to be top tier running backs, like we're the Niners offense, what we do is run the football. If we don't have an O-line, we can't run the football. It's plain and simple. It comes down to the basics of the Niners. We're a physical team. We're going to be a good defense. But if we can't run the ball, we have no offense. I mean, it shows it. Like, Brock Purdy is a great quarterback. We should pay him, but maybe not 45 or whatever million that everyone's saying that he should get. It should be around the range of like 30, 34. But like, we're not going to be able to run the ball if we don't have an offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I really would like to see the 49ers in the draft. Assuming like if we go into Mark's scenario where we get a higher draft pick, because I think right now we're kind of in that middle tier, maybe like that 14, 16 range. Who knows?
I think it's a 15 pick with what we have right now.
Yeah, so if we lose a few more games, we could maybe slide up and get a bona fide lineman of the future at whatever position. We said we want to replace Trent, center of the future, you name it. But I think it has to start with the draft. And even if we want to get more aggressive in free agency, just really attacking the line on both sides at all costs. So I think that's the battle's won in the trenches. I think, like you said, Mark, the skill players were pretty good. I think the one thing that's going to be hard for the fan base is letting go of Kyle Juszczyk. He's been a huge staple since Shanahan's been here and the Shanahan offense and running the ball. So that one's going to be a really tough one for the fan base to part if he does decide to leave the 49ers.
Yeah, Juszczyk I think is going to be a tough one to lose. Debo's going to be a tough one to lose. There's going to be a lot of guys, right, that have been foundation pieces the last 6 years for the 49ers that are gone because it's just about that time. In the game of football, Father Time wins. And there needs to be changes, and the great dynasties of this league have been able to transition off of guys through the draft or free agency or whatever it may be. And that's what the Niners need to do. When it comes to, the draft, I would love, like, the 49ers, when Shanahan and Kyle and Lynch took over, they emphasized defensive line and offensive linemen. And then they got away from that. And they started going towards skill players and, the fun guys to sign and can be impactful. And they got away from their basics. And the way I look at it is, I always bring up Larry Krueger because I listen to his podcast, and he had a good comparison of the 49ers with the Golden State Warriors. In 2020, 2021, the Golden State Warriors, they're coming off of their run where, they made multiple finals, conference championship appearances, and they were just kind of old and tired and had been through a lot of extra games, right? Almost a full extra season through playoff games. And, the Niners have been through that the last 5 years. And I hate you can't use that as an excuse when the Chiefs have, been in the Super Bowl every year and they're still dominating. But at the same time, it does take a toll. And I think the best thing for the 49ers this year is to, hey, get a little humble pie. You don't make the playoffs. You get an extra month of rest in the offseason and kind of debrief a little bit and reevaluate yourself as a organization. And so what I'm looking for from the 49ers this year is to finish off the year letting the young guys get reps. Let Renardo Green get reps. Let Tatum Bethune get reps at linebacker. Let, obviously, Mooney's been getting reps. Let Drake Nugent start at center over Brindle for the last 5 games. Let him get those reps. Let the young guys get reps. Corindo's going to get reps with Mason and McCaffrey being out. Let the young guys get reps and look toward the future, and then address your needs in the offseason. And your biggest needs are this: offense and defensive line. The game of football is won in the trenches. And if you can't dominate the line of scrimmage, you're going to lose football games all day long. So I think that for the 49ers this year, just got to dominate the line of scrimmage and look at the guys that are not dominating the line of scrimmage and replace them. And it's a cutthroat business. It's the NFL. It's pro football. And if you're not producing, you're gone. So I think that's the future for the 49ers. Just, reevaluate the roster, get rid of guys that have been foundational pieces for the past 5-6 years, and say, hey, you are a great 49er. You're going to be loved at Levi Stadium anytime you come to games in the future. But it's time for this organization to move forward and develop a team that is built to compete with the Chiefs, the Bills, the Packers, the Lions, the Vikings, these young upcoming teams. So I think that's the move for the 49ers in the future.
Moving on, right? I mean, we're playing the Bears. This is a game where I think all of us can talk about it as, once again, a must-win game. And we are in that weird situation where, do we play for a draft pick or do we play to make the playoffs? We're right in that window. And it's kind of hard as a 49ers fan to decide which one I care about more. I mean, I think you always want to shoot your shot and you always want to be competitive and be like a perennial playoff team, but we're not the same team. We're not playing the same game. We're not playing 49er football. What we're playing right now is, I don't know, last place football. I mean, I don't know how else you guys would describe it, but we're not doing the same things that we used to do, right? That we used to produce. We're not showing the same games. We're not doing anything well. We got our butts kicked against the Packers, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. I mean, the list goes every game on and on and on, where we should have won a lot of these games, but we're not winning. So what do? We look for the future. We hope that the 49ers against the Bears in an upcoming game can win, because otherwise, guys, I mean, we're fans. We still hope that we win. What are we looking forward to? When I turn on the game on Sunday night, I expect the 49ers to win. Well, we didn't. We got killed. That was a terrible game. Are we going to win when we do the same thing against the Bears?
Yeah, it's tough because the Bears, when the season started, it was one of those matchups where, like, it's going to be cool. We get to see the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams, quarterback play, see how he does against the 49ers defense. And I think we all kind of expected that the 49ers would win this game, but it would be entertaining nonetheless. But it's a lot different vibe this time. It's tough, like you said. We're really towing that line of like, if we win, we're gonna hurt our draft position. But obviously, if we lose, that's going to be better for us in the long run. But right now, it's not good for us, not good for the fan base, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I think I think we play to win with our guys. They're going to be young guys, so I don't know. Not to be a homer, but it's almost like that coach's mentality where you go out there, you play to win. You don't play to lose and just lay down. But it's really tough, man. We're going to have to navigate this one for weeks to come.
Yeah, you definitely never play to lose. That's as a football player, you just don't do that. Bottom line, whether it's pee-wee football, high school football, college football, pro football, you never play to lose because it's a physical game and you got to get out there and play the game. But for me, the Niners are in a situation where they're better off losing. The only way they can make the playoffs is if they win out. And so you're looking at the Bears, the Rams, winnable games. You're looking at Miami, Arizona, winnable games. But the game that's in there that's lurking is a Sunday night showdown or Monday night against the Lions, right?
That's like New Year's too, or something like that.
Yeah. So for me, it's you've got to win out, and the team you got to beat to win out. Obviously, the other four teams I just mentioned, like you should be able to beat them. But the Lions, that's a playoff game. So the season's not over technically. Like they could technically, if they win out, they win. They make the playoffs. If they win out, they make the playoffs because they beat all the teams in their division except for the Seahawks, which they've already beaten earlier in the year. And then I think the way that the division is going to play out, the teams aren't that great. If they can get to 10 wins, finish 10-7, they're in the playoffs. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And so what I see this week happening is this: the Bears coach just got fired. You guys both know that when teams coach gets fired, the next week they come out and they play probably their best football of the year. And I envision that happening this week. The Bears are going to play a great game. I think Caleb Williams is going to run around a lot. We don't do well with running quarterbacks. I don't know what Bosa's status is, but I don't think he's playing. And so I'm looking at this being a game where it's a very frustrating one where like we 17-14, we probably turn the ball over twice on the other side of the 50-yard line, and we just kind of do what we've been doing all year. But if the 49ers do have a shot to make the playoffs, they got to win out, in my opinion. And that's just the bottom line. And I would honestly rather them lose out and get a top 10 pick than win out and make the playoffs as a 7th seed, because I don't see a Super Bowl coming this year. So lose out, get a draft pick in the top 10 and, build for the future. But we'll see what Sunday has in store for the 49ers.
For the 49er faithful, if we win out, we do have a shot, right? We're going to be playing on the road every game because we're not going to be a top seed. It's going to be a lot different of a playoff appearance than we're used to. Now, exactly what Mark said is, I almost want us to not win out because I want us to be able to build for the future. But I think this week is going to be this is the Lynch point, if you will, not John Lynch, but Lynch point in the Niners' ability to potentially make or break the year. We win this week against the Bears, against a new head coach, against a
regime.
Against a new regime. Can we beat the Bears? And that's game one. Because I think moving forward, we have a situation where, again, we're looking at the future, but we're also looking at the present. And if we can capitalize on their misfortune, we have a chance at making the playoffs. But is it worth it? I guess my thought is you guys might feel the same way and Ryan, you can answer this question. Do we need to win this game? Because if we win, we're playoff hopeful. If we lose, we're right in the situation that we already are. There's no loss for the Niners today. If we lose this game, it's literally like a back and forth. It sucks.
Yeah. That's true. I think you're right. I think this game is going to tell us everything that we need to know for the rest of the season because you said it perfectly. If we win this game, obviously we know there's still the hope is still alive for us and we're going to look to the next week and we're going to say we're going to have to win that week and then it's going to keep going. But if we lose, then yeah, nothing to play for here. And we really got to be smart and strategic. So if we really have nothing to lose for, playoffs are out of the picture. After this week, then yeah, I think we know what path we're set on here.
Yeah, I guess. So what's your I mean, let's get to it, I guess. What's your prediction for this Sunday? For me, I'm looking at a game that's probably gonna no Trent, I would imagine.
No Bosa.
No Bosa, no Banks, no Mason, no McCaffrey. No Ayuk, no Greenlaw, no Deommodore Lenoir,
Hufanga,
no Jordan Elliott, no.
Yeah. The list
goes on and on and on. I'm looking for the 49ers to probably lose this game 24-17. We're going to get down to the red zone a lot, turn over the ball, miss field goals. I expect more of the same from the 49ers this year. In the last 2 weeks of 49er football, I've been on the couch watching the game, had no emotional investment. Usually I'm, on the edge of my seat, jumping up and down, kicking the air, punching the air. Wife's yelling at me saying I'm looking crazy. But the last 2 weeks, it's been just on the couch watching a Maction game on a Tuesday night. That's the emotion I brought to a Niners game. So I'm expecting Niners to lose this game 21-17. Off some heartbreak Jake Moody kicks that be missed and, some fourth down play calls that we lose on defense. And that's my prediction for this game. What are you guys expecting?
Man, it would be fitting if we lose from a Jake Moody kick because I was looking right now. It says Niners are just a 3.5 point favorite. So if we end up just losing by a field goal, that would be so crazy. Jake Moody too.
I have a feeling that Mark might be right. And like I was saying, is we're at that situation as a fan base where what is better? Do we lose? Do we win? Do we try to potentially make the playoffs? Obviously, you want to put yourself in a situation where you have a chance to advance. You want to make the Super Bowl. Can't do that if you're not in the playoffs. But we're kind of in a situation where it might be better for the 49ers to just lose. And I do think that it's going to be a close game. I mean, Mark said, I think 21-19. I think it's going to be closer than all of us would like to see. But I mean, I think I texted you guys. I said, hey, I'm going to switch over on the big screen at my place. And I'm going to start watching my shows on Sunday night because I got to go to bed, get shit done. The 49ers aren't the team where you stay up late and watch anymore. They're the team that you watch on replay. They're the team that you are looking for ESPN updates. I am unfortunately on the side of the fact that I think that we're going to be in that situation this week. So yeah, I think I'm going to go 24-19. I'm going to give us a little more credit. I think Jake Moody makes one of the field goals that he usually misses, but he still probably misses a couple. And it sends us into a game where we're not that close. We're far enough away to get a higher draft pick because we're going to lose, and not close enough to get the field goal that we're all going to hope that Jake Moody makes.
Yeah, I think it'll be a pretty close, low-scoring game, too. The over-under's at 44.5. But, yeah, I think if we're lucky, man, we'll get a few touchdowns. But I'm thinking it'll be something either 17-13 or something even lower than that. But I think the Niners, despite the coaching change, for some reason may pull it off. But again, I'm not holding off hope. I'm just going to be an observer on this one and see what happens and let it all unfold. Go from there.
Well, with that, guys, I think that we've talked quite a bit about the Niners. We have a lot of faith, as 49er faithful truly does, in the Niners franchise. But there's a lot going on, and I hope that we can figure it out through this game and through the next, and maybe we make the playoffs, maybe we don't, but this is it, guys. So with that, I hope that we can figure it out. Bang, bang.
Niner gang.
Niner gang.